see, I'm a simple college student living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver in the States. I've purposely locked myself out of all media and internet aside from school purposes. As I was busy with school and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver at launch. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take a week to arrive. I decided that during that time I would replay Pokemon Crystal on my Game Boy Color. However, I realized that my mother threw it away long ago because I told her the save went dead. She also threw away my copy of Silver, leaving me with just the Game Boy Color and no games. As such, I just happened to find a copy at a local yard sale. I went home and started it up with a nostalgia trip. However, that's where things began getting bizarre. The Game Freak logo showed up like normal, but the game froze. I thought that the cart had messed up or something, so I turned it off and on again. The same thing happened. I tried pressing all of the buttons, but nothing happened. Eventually the logo vanished and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was suddenly placed in the game with a previous save file. Either way, I wasn't complaining. I would have chosen continue anyway. It was odd. I figured there must have been something wrong with the internal battery or something. First, I checked the trainer information. The character's name was set to ... This guy didn't have much originality. I checked the profile and apparently he had put 999.99 hours into the game. He had all 16 badges, the max amount of Pokédollars, and all 251 Pokemon logged into the Pokédex. I assumed he cheated, or was a really hardcore Pokemon player. I checked his party to see what sort of badass team he had. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and a 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I thought it must have been some cruel joke played by the person who last played the game, but I decided to check the profiles of these Pokemon anyway. As expected, there were different letters of unknown. All of them were level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the word spelled out to be leave. As for the 6th Pokemon, it turned out to be a Cyndaquil. It looked normal, but it was level 5 with only 1 HP left. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time I disregarded it. The most eerie thing about it was that despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokemon had sounded their cries. There was only silence. Having enough of the team, I closed that screen. I was parked at what appeared to be a room inside Bellsprout Tower, but without any NPCs around. Even stranger was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, and appeared to be leaning on its side. There was no music either, and there didn't appear to be any exit. I walked around the room for a few minutes, but I couldn't find my way out. This was certainly not a room I had seen in Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for an escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There didn't seem to be any wild Pokemon either. Finally, I managed to find a ladder. It turned out to be behind the pillar. The screen turned black and the music finally started. The music was that theme you hear when you listen to the radio at the ruins of Alph, where you catch unknown. I had a sudden chill when I recognized it. Eventually I realized that I wasn't in a loading transition, but a dark room and would need to use flash. Before I took care of that, however, I checked my Pokégear to change the radio to something more pleasant. Oddly, there was no radio card. The Pokégear was even lacking phone and time cards. There was only a map card, in which Gold was walking in a sea of black. I realized that Cyndaquil had flash, so I turned off my Pokégear and made the Pokemon use the needed attack. I didn't see any message saying hurry use flash, or anything of the sort. The room simply became lit, just like that. The room was a chilling blood red. Upon looking around, I noticed there was only one way to go, a gray path. It didn't have one of those colored changes for when you enter a certain area. One area was red, and it cut off to a stark gray. The ladder to enter the room was missing as well. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made, but never dark enough to require the use of flash again. I finally made it to the end, where I noticed a sign there. It said, "Turn back now." Suddenly, the option to select yes or no appeared, despite no question being asked. I chose yes, as I didn't know what it was asking. The screen faded to black. Suddenly, it said Hurry has fainted. As I recall, there weren't any status conditions on him, and I clearly wasn't in a battle. I was in another dark room. I checked my Pokemon quickly, but he was no longer in the party. In fact, none of my Pokemon were there. Instead, they were all replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the unknown. It said, he died. Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that was only 4 squares big. The walls of that room were gray bricks, as if I was inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appeared to be a bunch of graves similar to the ones in red and blue. I walked around that small room and pressed A bunch of times, but nothing happened. By then I had concluded that it was a hacked game. Some sadistic person had sold me at a yard sale. But my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of ... again, only to find out that the sprite of Gold was missing his arms. He also appeared less smug and more sad. He also had 24 badges, which is impossible. After a few minutes of aimlessly wandering around the room, Gold suddenly did the escape rope animation. Instead of flying up, however, he spun downwards. After that, the music stopped. After finally landing, Gold's sprite was colored differently. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appeared completely white, including his skin. It was as if he came straight from the old Game Boy games and was placed into a colored background of a Game Boy Color game. I checked his profile and he was as white as his overworld sprite. He had lost his legs, and bloody tears appeared to be coming from his eyes. It also said he had 32 badges, which started to disturb me. This change of numbers seemed to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon. At the time, the party contained 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi. The unknown at the time were level 15 and spelled out dying. I checked out the Celebi's profile and it turned out to be shiny. Half of the sprite wasn't there. There was only 1 leg, 1 arm, and 1 eye. It had only 1 attack too. Perish Song. The area I was in was the Sprout Tower, with the same immobile pillar as before, but everything was red. I walked north for what felt like forever, before encountering generic NPC characters. They were all lined up to the side, facing the pillar in the middle of the room. They were white like gold, and nothing happened when I tried to interact with them. I paid them no mind and kept going north until the pillar appeared to be chopped off. A transparent-looking red was in that spot, and I walked up to him. Without even pressing A, I was suddenly engaged in a battle. The music started again. It sounded like the unknown radio music, but played backwards. Gold's battle back sprite matched the front one, while Red's was the same as before in gold, silver, and crystal, with the exception of it being transparent. The text simply said, "Blank wants to battle." It was as if he had no name. Both of us had only 1 Pokemon each, which was odd since I had 6 before. My shiny Celebi was called out, with the half a sprite for its back sprite as well. The shiny noise and animation was different. Red sent out a seemingly normal Pikachu at level 255, and a seemingly sad sprite with teary eyes. I was only given the option to use attacks. Because Celebi only had 1, I chose it. Pikachu used Curse. It lowered his speed and increased his other stats. I'm not even sure if it's possible for a Pikachu to learn that move. Celebi used Perish Song. 3 turns, both Pokemon would be KO'd, but it wasn't like I had a choice. At this point, it didn't go back to the fight menu. The battle continued without me. Pikachu used Flail. It didn't do much damage despite his level. It didn't boost his health either, since it was maxed out. Celebi used Perish Song. Nothing happened as Celebi had used it in the previous turn. Pikachu used Frustration. This did a ton of damage and knocked Celebi down to less than 10 HP. Celebi used Pain Split. This surprised me, as Celebi didn't have that attack in the first place. Both Pokemon ended up with around 150 HP. Pikachu used Main Look. It did absolutely nothing. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, Celebi fainted. In the next turn, however, it said Celebi has died. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards, it said Pikachu had died. With a slow fade-out animation, the transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The battle ended at that point, and faded out along with the music. I was back in the overworld with another change to the gold sprite. It was just as transparent as red was. I quickly checked Gold's profile, and it showed that only remained of him was his head, with transparent skin. It also stated he had 40 badges. I backed out and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown that spelled out, "No more." I was back in Gold's room in New Barktown. I thought maybe I was able to play the game properly. But what was I kidding? I knew some sadistic fuck must have done something. I walked around the room to interact with things, as I was afraid to go down the stairs to see what was waiting there. Note I said that I walked, but while the background was moving, Gold wasn't moving his transparent limbs at all. He was floating like the ghosts in Diamond and Pearl. As expected, nothing worked. I had no choice but to go down the stairs. I ended up in the lower level of Gold's house. Everything appeared to be normal, but Gold's mother was at home. After failing to interact with anything in that room, I decided to go outside. To my surprise, instead, I walked straight through it into a void. I continued moving south to see what the fuck was going on. Gold's house vanished as I walked away from it. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. Gold's regular sprite. I talked to him and he said, "Goodbye forever," and vanished. As that happened, it said question, used nightmare. At that point, I didn't deny that to be possible. Gold did another escape route animation afterward. I was back in that small hollowed out room surrounded by graves. Or at least, I say I was back there. I tried to walk around, but nothing happened. Not even a wall bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile and there was no sprite. It said I had 0 badges and all the gym leaders were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokemon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, it spelled out another phrase I dared to read. I'm dead. As soon as I went back to the overworld, I figured out what room that was when a text box popped up and said, "Rest in peace." That room was a big grave surrounded by other graves. Gold had already been dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokemon master, was unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death.